So our first partner, the United States Embassy here in Kingston, Continental Baking Company through their brand National, the GMMB Joan Duncan Foundation, Mussons Foundation, Sandals Foundation, Proven Wealth, and the Lascook Chin Foundation. Please put your hands together for them. Hello. So, we are here for our little panel discussion, and we have to my left, yes, left. First, we have Doris. Doris, please introduce yourself and your organization.
Yes, good afternoon again. Doris Gross, board member for Kingston Creative and Art District lead.
And to Doris's left, we have Christina.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christina Monteith, We Changes Community and Outreach Officer.
And we are expecting one more panelist, but she's dealing with something outside. So we will start, and we do have an apology from Mr. Kemoy Reed from the National Youth Council of Jamaica, who is unavoidably absent. So let me start by giving us a little context. Of course, you know, CVSS, we were founded in 1940 and is the longest serving and the largest coordinating body for 115 voluntary non-governmental organizations. And of course, we're based here in Jamaica. And of course, our principal goal is to serve the voluntary sector through capacity building for members and the wider community, creating sustainable alliances and facilitating mutual support and joint action. And so we are here today to discuss what does the future of volunteerism look like. So for context, I'm using an American study, which was released in August 2020 by Point of Light, which showed that while 36% of Americans had participated in volunteer activities pre-pandemic, 73% believe volunteering is going to be even more important than ever after the pandemic. And also, the sweeping disruptions and devastation felt by the pandemic has inspired individuals to volunteer. So, what is the Jamaican experience? A lot of us say that the last couple of years have been challenging for most organizations and that it has caused volunteerism to change. So, Doris, what has your experience been with volunteers?
Kingston Creative started in 2018. So we had an opportunity for 2 years to build a strong volunteer core. It was actually those 2 years that Kingston Creative existed only with volunteers. A seed was planted, a framework created, and in 2018, volunteers got to work on it. We created art opportunities in downtown Kingston. We created opportunities for creative people to grow, that's the people, and opportunities for a creative city to grow, which is the place. After all, Kingston was designated Creative City of Music by UNESCO, so now we needed to step up to the place. So for 2 years, volunteers gave their time, their expertise, and their strong commitment to a cause that they believed in. It was volunteers who funded the organization. There was no money, there was no grant, there was no sponsor as yet. So in my experience, the volunteers that started Kingston Creative are really the backbone. They're really it. They really created it. from there on, COVID incidentally hit, but also these volunteers managed to create such an excitement and projects around the vision that we attracted funding. With funding came responsibility and larger projects, serious deadlines, reporting back to high-level boards, and that could only be achieved with full-time staff, part-time staff, project officers, and meeting these deadlines. So at that point, volunteerism shifted from purely volunteers to an organization with employment, people who needed a salary. Then therefore, the shift now has turned us into a strong organization who's very effective and hardworking, but with volunteers as our backbone. They're our sounding board. They will always be there, and we continue to attract new volunteers, because no organization is perfect in its structure. There are gaps to be filled. There's expertise to be put in. There are opinions to be given. So our experience is really that the volunteers with Kingston Creative right now are the voices that we need to listen to. We don't claim to know it all at all. It's a diverse group of all ages, even though more younger than older, more female than male, quite strongly, for some reason. And they really provide that the passion that they all started with remains, that the organization doesn't change from a bunch of volunteers being excited to a boring 9 to 5 organization that lacks the passion and the memory of why this was actually started.
That's very important. Very
Yeah.
important.
So this was really our experience of a shift where we started and where we are today.
Beautiful. Christina, what has been your experience?
So We Change has been around for 6 years this year. And as an organization, I think we've developed also a volunteer model. So we started literally top to bottom, run entirely by volunteers. And I've had to expand that. We've created a membership program and that kind of thing. But after 6 years, you're looking towards the future. You're looking towards how to build and scale the organization, because what we found is that the interest in being a part of We Change, the demands on our energy and our time, and the kind of expertise we've built over 6 years has grown. And so we have to rise to that challenge. And also the excitement is still there. We still want to do more. We still want to work more closely with our communities. So we found that we've had to shore up the basis of our programs, especially our volunteer program, and build out some real core values and tactics that we're going to take that can take us into the future. And one of those is being people first, human-centered right throughout. And obviously the pandemic really underscored that, because there was no way to work with people without hearing about the different needs and issues that they have, whether it's loneliness and isolation, or just being confused about where to go and what to do, or grief, and there's so many needs that people have. And so there's no way to work with people without taking those into consideration. They don't leave their issues at the door. They come in as fully realized human beings. And so if you're going to work with people and depend on their expertise and their time, you kind of have to at least put some plan into place for how you're going to accommodate that and build around it. So being human-centered and care-centered is really a core part of what We Change does. The other thing we do is to be volunteer driven. So volunteers are able to shape and create their own pathways through We Change. They're able to say, well, this is how I want to volunteer. This is not just in terms of time, but also the kind of activities that they want to do. And listening to them and centering their voices as members of our community is absolutely essential for us. They're the guiding voice behind where we go and how we organize the work we do. We've also tried to become more resilient, as COVID has shown us, because to be honest, there was a time at the start of the pandemic where we really had to go, how are we going to do this work in this space? And also, once we got through that, how do we manage if we're in this space again or a similar challenge? So we had to build our resilience, building more flexible volunteer programs that could pivot in this, whenever there's a challenge or that kind of thing, being more collaborative, reaching out to our partners, reaching out to people who we knew needed us, and so we could build synergies. We also had to, create a space that's very much volunteer centered. I know I'm saying this a lot, but it is so much a part of what we do. Just listening to volunteers and creating that space. And then finally, we had to be more innovative. So increasing our use of tech, increasing our use of data in driving the decisions that we were making, and how we plan and forecast for the future in fundraising. Literally, there's so many uses that we just having that kind of data and collecting feedback has been a really big part of how we've been able to structure our program. And so as we go forward, those are the kinds of things that we're looking to build into our program and expanding it, and learning from other leaders in the space about how to do that.
Beautiful, beautiful. Welcome. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good
Let me
afternoon.
introduce Carol. Please introduce your organization, the 4-H Club. Tell us a little about it, and then let us know what volunteerism looks for you.
All right. So good afternoon, everyone. I am Carol McCormack, Public Relations and Marketing Manager of the Jamaica 4-H Clubs. The Jamaica 4-H Clubs is a statutory body under the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries. But though we're a statutory body, we do have a volunteer outfit. And we have volunteers numbering over 5,000 persons right across the island. We have 3 major voluntary arms, and these are the Island Advisory Council, which is the umbrella group of the Parish Advisory Council, and these are volunteers who work along with the 4-H clubs in the parish in an advisory capacity to assist with fundraising, to assist with training, etc. We also have the National Leaders Association, and again, an umbrella group for the leaders of the 4-H clubs in the parish. And most of these persons are actually teachers in schools, or persons who lead the community groups that we have on a community basis. I should just let you know that automatically people think of 4-H clubs just in schools. But we're also in churches, we're also in communities, we're also in juvenile facilities, and we also work with persons with disabilities as well as other persons with special needs. We also have the Junior Leaders League, and this is like as the name implies, the junior version of the National Leaders Association. So these are for our youth, and we start as young as 15, and basically we are now training them to become not only the leaders of the 4-H clubs, but in general, the leaders of tomorrow. So basically, that's the Jamaica 4-H clubs. We're as old as the CVSS. In April, we will celebrate our 82nd anniversary. And the JS is here. We also sprung out of the JS. And we are heavily involved. Our mandate really is to deliver agricultural and other training to youth across the island. Now, in terms of volunteerism, how it has been for us, like with everything else, it has been challenging during COVID, because Jamaica 4-H clubs, we rely and we execute a lot of what you'd call face-to-face activities and grand activities, such as our parish and national achievement expos. And again, we also work within the educational system. So we work with schools. So naturally, with schools closed and we can't be face-to-face, as the buzzword is pivot, we too had to pivot. So basically, we just took all of our training programs online using the various platforms, the popular one, Zoom. We also increased our training content on our social media platforms. So training sessions, which would have been done face to face in a particular setting, what we had to do now, we had to organize smaller groups, record those training sessions, and now to our constituents online. So for us, it has also been strategic, because what we have found is that we're reaching even greater persons in terms of our training. And it has also given us the opportunity to expand certain programs that we have. So, for example, our Reap Starter 1000, which came out of our Reap Builder program, that was basically for young persons who have an interest in agriculture. The Reap Starter, however, we kind of focused that on persons who were involved in the hospitality industry and they were displaced as a result of that. So they need something to do. They lost their jobs. So we provided training for them in terms of how to start agricultural enterprises, so poultry rearing, goat rearing, apiculture, etc. And in terms of getting the volunteers, we really didn't have a problem getting the volunteers because of the goodwill of 4-H and because they see that we're still exercising our mandate. They were willing in terms of assisting with the training, the tutoring, etc. So for the 4-H clubs, yes, it has been challenging, but it has also been strategic, and it has allowed us to also, to put our programs in a way that you are dealing with persons face to face, but you also now have the capacity to deal with persons virtually.
Thank you. So it sounds like, based on what the three of you have said, is that you have all adjusted your volunteer engagement based on COVID. I'm actually also surprised because listening to the three of you, it sounds as if you all have a very young volunteer base. And a number of people think that volunteering is for old people. So yeah, well, I know I'm not old, so I don't know about the rest of you. So the question then was, is volunteering for everybody? And what keeps on coming back to me is time, talent, and treasures. How do you, because we want to give some practical examples to our attendees, how do you encourage your volunteers? How do you attract your volunteers? Let's start with at the end, Christina.
So a big part of how we attract our volunteers is to put our values front and center of our messaging. So we're very clear that we are a community-based organization, that we are a feminist organization, that women and queer people are centered in everything that we do, that we are inclusive upfront all the time. And so because we're targeting people who understand and agree with those values, it makes it easier for us to reach through the general noise of come volunteer. It's come volunteer for a cause that you actually care about. Come volunteer and make a difference on an issue that matters to you. Come volunteer and solve something that you're affected by. So we definitely put that front and center. And the second thing that we do is we're very clear on the evidence of the impact. So volunteers know that the work that they're doing is valued by us, and they know the impact of the work that they do. So we're reporting constantly, this is what your money did. This is what your time did. This is what your energy did. This is what your expertise did. And then we also have a value proposition to our volunteers. It's not just, hey, you can tell people that you gave 40 hours to us. It's also, this is making impact in your own life. So we're training, so we're providing other opportunities with our partners. So we're telling you upfront that this is what we want to give to you as a volunteer, because we recognize that the service that volunteers give to us is work. It is time, it is energy, it is expertise, and we really value that very upfront. So in our messaging, those are the things that we center, and we find that that works for us because it really gets to who we're looking for.
Great, great. Doris?
Yes, well said, Christina. I would say the first thing that comes to my mind is it's important to give people a voice in general. And in terms of volunteers, to me, that means give those volunteers that are a part of your organization a voice and allow them to truly participate. I think a lot of times even in newer organizations that have just been formed, we tend to adopt a framework and a structure of what was there in the past. They may come from a very old-fashioned look of a framework with a hierarchy from top to bottom. And the world has changed, and as people we have changed, and we have all moved to a more equal space. So of course there has to be a leader, and there has to be somebody in the middle, and then there has to be somebody who sorts of helps out. That does not mean their voices could not be equally strong and valued and important. So I think when you allow your organization to carry the voices of everybody in there, not the one leader, then you're stronger for it. And therefore, you're attracting volunteers to be a part of it. I think there's this notion of a volunteer does the leftover work, the work that is, monotonous, that is forever repeating, that nobody wants to do, and that needs to change.
Got it. That is so true. That is so true.
All
Carol?
right. So for me, first of all, when you're talking about volunteerism, I believe that first and foremost, you have to have a passion for it. So, because if you don't have the passion, then you're not going to give it your all, right? In terms of is volunteer for the older folks? Is it for the youth? Well, speaking from a youth training organization, clearly we are helping the youth to get into the act of volunteerism. As I said before, we're an agricultural based organization. So our volunteerism has that kind of twist and that kind of slant towards it. So we do have a blend. So we have our youth and we have the older folk who help to guide. And right across the platform, in terms of who we have as volunteers, that's the basic thing, that there's the passion for agriculture, there's a passion for youth development, there's a whole passion, especially now with what is happening with COVID, the whole aspect of food security, because that is where we are also pitching our training in terms of getting more people involved in backyard gardening, home gardening. We started with a backyard garden challenge, for example, and it has now become a full-fledged home garden program. So you have persons or volunteers, they go out and they help. And of course, because we're a youth training organization, volunteerism is open to everyone. But of course, we have to do serious checks and balances because you're dealing with young people and there are repercussions for your brand if anything should go wrong. But in terms of volunteerism, 4-H clubs, we always make room for volunteers. We are always looking for volunteers. But of course, we want you to have the passion. And what we also do in 4-H clubs too is that you are a volunteer, you're volunteering, sorry, but you can also springboard in terms of advocacy, in terms of advocating for all those areas that we're talking about. And just to say that, as I mentioned, advocacy, for example, we now have a new group of 11 young persons who are known as the Youth Agvocate, AGVOCATE. So it's a play on advocating for agriculture. And these are young persons who are going out there, they're talking to young people involved in agriculture, encouraging young people to get involved, and also to make note in terms of what are the issues affecting youth involved in agriculture. These are persons who they themselves are involved in agriculture, but they have willingly volunteered themselves to be a part of this outfit, to dedicate to serve for 2 years, because that's their tenure, and dedicate themselves to putting social media campaigns together, that kind of thing, and also at the appropriate time to literally have a seat at the table with the Minister of Agriculture to talk about these issues with him, and also to arrive at a solution in terms of how we can make the sector better for youth and how we can make the sector more technologically driven and that kind of thing. So as I said, for 4-H, when it comes to volunteerism, I mean, we are strong on that, even though in terms of the paid members of staff, we are public sector workers, but the volunteer aspect of 4-H is very strong and continues to be strong.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I'm hearing a lot of engagement around young people. And we have heard a lot of discussion about moving to online platforms for training. And it occurred to me that in this move towards modernization and involving the young, are we leaving our older volunteers out of this movement? Doris?
I guess I'm sure we all agree that there is a place for everyone and their contributions. So we tend to say that the older folks have more experience and therefore take on a guiding role, and support with their know-how, where the younger ones are still eager to learn from that and have probably more of a passion or a spirit or an active sort of role to play in things. But that has shifted as well. I think technology has added to that. So a lot of older people are not familiar with technology and have been taking social media courses. And even more encouraging to see that now an 18-year-old can teach a 65-year-old. So it's nice to see that the roles are shifting, because there's also sort of a resistance against, well, you're a little older, you want to tell me what to do. So again, everybody's role and voice get stronger and become more equally valuable. And then to add to that, I would say that to keep volunteers of all age groups, it's important to include training. We all have diverse and different backgrounds. Some of them have a more intense level of academic education than others. That does not mean we know it all at all. So whatever the organization needs, it may be very subtle skills. It may be emotional skills. It may be something else, or learning Excel or learning something more practical. I think that keeps volunteer interested and participating, and it allows them to move up from being a volunteer to being an intern, to being an apprentice, to being a staff member when an opportunity comes in, and eventually to be management, just because they were there from the root. They have it in them what this is all about. Therefore, they'll be excellent employees and excellent managers when they get to that place, if they so desire.
Passion, they'll have the passion. Carol?
I'm happy that she made that comment, from intern to members of staff, because we do have some of that too in 4-H. And, it just goes to show the dedication and the passion to not only to the organization, but also to the cause. So I don't think the older folk are being left out. I think it's a perfect blend in terms of transfer of knowledge from the older to the younger. And, in terms of technology, what the younger can now teach the older. I mean, older persons now doing TikTok videos, can I tell you? Yes.
Well, I started my daughter's.
And can I tell you, even in that program, that initiative that we had last year with the Family Backyard Garden Challenge, where we asked families to show off their gardens. And what we ensured was that as the family, yes, you had the youth, but you also had to include people, even your grandmother, even though grandmothers don't look like grandmothers anymore. But
that's true too.
But the point I'm making is, there's that transfer of knowledge. So I don't think nobody's being left behind.
Okay.
I think it's a very good blend. Okay. And I think too that also, as I said, helps in terms of transfer of knowledge, which is important, because we don't want to lose things along the way.
Absolutely. So Christina, different question for you. There has been that move from traditional advertising and radio to social media. What would you say is the impact of social media and the technology in volunteerism?
I think the impact has been different for different organizations depending on how you leverage it. I think for some organizations, they went directly full on to tech, full on to social media. And then it was good for some, but I think you lose some of that connection. You lose some of that, the granularity of the people that you're actually engaging with. I think when you can see people and you can hear their voices, online, it tends to get boiled down to metrics. It gets tend to boil down to how many likes and that kind of thing. So you can lose some of that. But also, if you're deliberate in how you use it, it can also help you to connect even further than you could before. So, one of the things that happened with WeChange is that we recognize that a lot of the women that we're engaging have mobility issues. So whether you live in Westmoreland and you find it difficult to engage in our program in Kingston, that was very easy for us to know, offer it online and get them in. Similarly with young people, especially or the young women that we engage, a lot of the times that this episodic type of volunteerism that we've been talking about today, they don't necessarily want to be someone who's giving 50 hours, for the year or that kind of thing. Sometimes they want to, WeChange is doing something cool. I like this. And they just jump in and then they jump back out and then we don't hear from them for a couple months and then they're back again. But we value that. We understand that people have different time needs and different interests, and sometimes they want to pick a pathway that appeals to them. So I think social media allows you to build out more branches, but it's not, it's not a panacea for all the issues that we had in volunteerism before, and it also doesn't replace that traditional, that face-to-face, that in-person, that community-based, that grassroots level of investment that you can give to people. I think you have to balance them and use them in a way that actually adds to your capacity, actually adds to the work that you do.
So Doris, I actually heard about Kingston Creative because of social media. What has been your organization's experience?
Yeah, it has supported our growth for sure, because I think it attracts persons that are on social media a lot and therefore use that platform to communicate. So we're attracting young creatives or anyone who likes the arts and music and dance. So that coincided really well. So it has really been good for us.
Okay. And have you utilized it?
Oh, definitely. As I said earlier, most of our training we have now had to put them online.
Okay.
So definitely, that is one of the strategic ways in which we're reaching even more persons. So in terms of our training, in terms of our visibility, because we're on the major social media platforms, and of course because we're a youth training organization, we have to look at the other platforms and add. So for example, 4-H is now on TikTok. Before we said, yes, we're dealing with young people, so we have to go where the young people are. So again, for us,
where's Nancy? Nancy, we need to get CBSS on TikTok, right? Right, Zachary?
Yes.
We need to get
Yes.
on a TikTok.
Can I tell you?
Right? Okay.
Right. So, so definitely for us, the social media, as I said, it has extended our reach in terms of training. It has certainly extended our reach in terms of visibility, because, for example, from my desk, I mean, like, if I don't make a post or two in a day, it's like problems, because we have to keep on letting people see the 4-H out there, letting people see that we are still relevant in terms of the training that we offer. It has also given rise to us to even do some level of rebranding. So for example, we have changed now our vision and mission statements. So the vision that is associated with 4-H clubs is to become the hub for agricultural excellence. So that is how we are now realigning ourselves. And again, this is because of what is happening with the pandemic, the fact that we have to be out there more now in social media, and the fact that we have to continue reaching the young people out there.
So what I'm hearing is that as we look to the future, we also need to be re-examining how the organization is structured, what our vision and mission is, to ensure that we are making ourselves still relevant to what exists. And so another question I wanted us to address in terms of the future is, how do we break down any barriers there are to volunteering? Who wants to go first? Christina?
Yeah, so I think we break down the barriers by listening. I find that a lot of times when let's speak about young people first. So when young people say, we want to be engaged in this particular way, and we want this from volunteering, I think sometimes we go, yeah, but that doesn't work for us. So, so I think when you listen and you actually value the people that you're trying to engage, and then you take deliberate steps to make it inclusive for them, to make it not just meaningful, but also comfortable. At, at We Change, we want you to feel like this is somewhere that you can thrive. This is somewhere that is actively listening to you and wants to take your needs into account. This is somewhere where your voice is valued. This is, a space that was built deliberately for you, and I think that's going to become very important and to be targeted in helping people to be able to thrive in these spaces. So, for example, we've been trying to increase the amount of women with disabilities that we engage. And we don't just want to do that in a way that we say, hey, we want you in our organization, but then you come there and there's no recognition of your needs as a person. So building deliberately to ensure that different people with different accessibility needs, different energy needs, different time, neurodivergence, all of these things, we take them into account. Because like I said, if you work with people, you have to be human-centered, people first, and people have all these needs that come into account, so you have to take them into consideration.
Absolutely. Doris?
So I heard the word listen. I would have started to just is really listen, but then take that you hear and be flexible. Be truly flexible with it. Don't listen and then go back to what you had written out in your outline or in your vision statement and whatever that may be that you're holding on to from way back there. Be flexible and allow these voices to infiltrate even in our own thinking who are already doing. And we always have in our heads what we have in our heads, so it's very difficult to make it shift. That would be my take at it. Be flexible and allow the organization to be a little more fluid and organic. Most organizations can't be totally fluid because they're spending somebody's money, but there is a way within which that could be done.
I would say, yes, listen and be accommodating. Listen to in terms of the messaging that you're putting out there. So if you are used to having a particular message and a particular look, how can you now be more accommodating, more flexible to also give that new and fresh look to your brand? So because an organization such as 4-H is 82 years old, that doesn't mean that we are grand and great grandparents. We're a youth organization, so we have to be flexible to accommodate the youth. And they come with ideas. They actually want to volunteer. So for example, as I said earlier, our Junior Leaders League, they are a network across the island, and they have to bring to us activities that they want to execute, of course, with guidance. And some of these activities, agricultural in the main, but also human-centered. So they still want to go and hand out care packages. They still want to go to a community center and help to paint it, that kind of thing. They still want to do their Labor Day projects. I mean, had to be tapered down because of COVID, but they still want to do that. So in terms of breaking down the barriers, I would say listen to the persons who want to volunteer. They're coming with ideas. They're coming with new twists to what we know and how those can be more attractive to persons out there.
Absolutely. So we need to keep an open mind
Yes,
and
definitely.
be less, not less structured, but
Not be so stoic in your ways.
less
Right.
open up
Right.
instead of narrow. Okay, so I wanted to give us our participants to be able to ask some questions. So gonna start at this table. Karen, what does the future of volunteerism look like to you? Or maybe you want to, here you go.
There I go. For me, I found I was agreeing very much with the listen part. Because I think if we don't listen and if we don't try to learn how to understand what the future looks like, then we won't be able to pivot and to go with the flow. And if that's our intention, then we must listen. We must try to understand better what are young people, what do they want, what do they like, what's the way forward. And if we're able to do that well, then I think it makes it a much easier movement.
Beautiful, beautiful. Who shall I pounce on next? This table. You want to go?
All right. How I see volunteerism, I see volunteerism in an aspect where when we can cohese and work with each other to see where we want to go in future endeavors, it is a great, great idea where different social economic background coming together, putting their ideas on the table, and where those who are in authority will also agree and work with it and move forward.
So volunteerism is the great equalizer, because we're all working towards the same cause. This lady.
So, speaking from the context of government, as I listen to the panelists, I realized that what the future of volunteerism looked like for me. As I sit in the room, I did not even know so many agencies exist that had volunteers. I am just centered around the humanitarian actors of Red Cross, ADRA, Volunteer. If we could get what we call a volunteerism registry that encompass everybody, government, non-government, that operate in the context of inclusiveness, that allows for gender and equity, where you have this, for want of a better terminology, a cadre of boots on the ground.
Right.
That when there's a disaster, it's not about mutual aid, campaigning, advocacy. We could draw on strength and numbers and get the job done.
Beautiful, beautiful. Miss Janet, what does your future of volunteerism look like?
For me, when I sit and I listen, I know that it's in good hands. Young people are robust, young people are vibrant, and I don't believe that there is any need for fear. One of the things that I think that older people need to do right now is to really open their hands to young people, and understanding that as we go, we step out, they are beautiful people, strong minds, ready to step in those shoes. And so for me, I'm very comfortable. To be honest, for the first time in a long time, I understand that they are wonderful young people with a vision.
And we have
Shalani, the future of volunteerism looks bright like the sun to me, because with the help of my newfound peers, I plan on making a difference in the people they send back to Jamaica.
wonderful. So collaboration is very important.
So also, I'm a deaf person who works in the deaf community. I have different organizations in the deaf community. So my experience is that deaf youth wants to be involved in the service community, but we don't have communication access. So we're stuck out, we're left out. So now we have technology developments where more people are involved and they can learn sign language. So for the future of volunteerism, we can have more deaf people being involved in there. So we want them to develop their skills, right? And we also want to also for deaf people to give back to nation development as well. So right now, what we need to do is need to partner with different organizations in different agencies where we can work together and collaborate for this.
Awesome, awesome. Collaboration, partnership. What are some other words?
Carlisle can vouch for.
Huh? I heard the word shouted out. What are the other words? Collaboration, partnership,
Hi, I'm Ashika. I'm Nancy. Who sends you all those 500
flexibility,
million emails.
unity, cohesiveness, caring, sharing, adaptability, quality, youthfulness. I think that is what the future of volunteerism holds. And so I'm going to wrap up a little early unless there are more questions. All right, one more question.
Okay, so the folks who are at every CVSS event, I'm asking questions on the organization end, right? How are you as organizations establishing that system for data management? When I look at the future of volunteerism, one of the things that I think about, Andre alluded to it earlier, is the access. There's also the reality of ensuring that data protection and some of those other components, the data that Paris spoke about earlier, those things are considered in the way organizations prepare themselves for volunteers. Not giving the volunteer boring work, not giving the volunteer the things that nobody else wants to do. How do you ensure as an organization you are so structured to ensure that the data protection, considerations for confidentiality, things in our case as JAD is the discrimination issue. How do you ensure that those things are accurately and appropriately attended to ensure that you're not putting yourself as an organization in a difficult position and also not putting yourself in a position where you're basically feeding your volunteer to the slaughter when it comes to discrimination issues with your target audience? How are you managing that process?
So it's a really good question, And I can't answer it with saying we manage this all wonderfully, because we actually don't. So I think what that question needs is an effort, the same kind of effort of umbrella organizations, of an umbrella that creates these databases. Because what I find is that Kingston Creative, probably just like We Change, every time we want to address a particular theme, we go out and collect data. What do people think? What do people want? But truthfully, we do it at a sort of, piecemeal basis. We send out a survey here and a survey there, and then we add them up. Here and there, we call Paris on some information, but then he only has the information that someone else asked him to collect. So I think missing here is this sort of national framework of things, and I'm no database specialist to know what this is, that we can all tap into, which takes time to establish. But I think that would be a worthwhile conversation that we like Paris to get involved in as well.
I think Paris is going to be a national volunteer. And he commented and said he was dragged into this kicking and screaming. I think most volunteers are dragged in kicking and screaming. They don't really know what they're getting themselves into. But once they are engaged and once they are giving back, the fulfillment that a person receives, they just want to keep on giving. Which is why, as Nicole said earlier, that is why we have to say thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm thanking my panel. Thank you, ladies. I'm thanking this stage for not making me fall. And I want you to turn to each other and say thank you. Thank you for being a volunteer. Yes, thank you. Okay, so I'm only actually 5 minutes early. And so I am going to ask my panelists, please, you can vacate at this point. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.